everyone. Welcome. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. I'm Rhonda Sperrey, the superintendent here in RSU-64, and I am so excited to welcome you and Brooke Shannon, our speaker tonight. We listened to Brooke today with our staff. She did a keynote with our staff this afternoon, and I've gotten to know Brooke just a little bit today. This is her first time in Maine. First time in Maine, and she plans to come back, so we will definitely welcome her back in the future. What a gift it is for us to have her here with us tonight. So I want to talk a little bit about Brooke as I introduce her to you. Brooke is the founder and executive director of the Wait Until 8th campaign. The Wait Until 8th pledge empowers parents to rally together to delay giving children a smartphone until at least 8th grade. Brooke works with parents and communities across the country to help families establish a healthy relationship with technology. She is a national speaker on how to parent in the digital arena and has given keynotes to the American Enterprise Institute and numerous schools and churches. Brooke also is a resource to the media. She has appeared on the Today Show, Good Morning America, NBC National News, NPR, and CNN Headline News. More than 65,000 families from around the country have taken the Wait Until 8th pledge, and numerous media outlets have featured the pledge, including the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, USA Today, LA Times, the Boston Globe, and the Dallas Morning News. Recently, she may have been featured a little bit on WABI, if you saw that spot that they did with us, and also on Maine Calling this week. So Brooke has a master's in integrated marketing communications from Northwestern University and a BA in political science and communications from the University of Miami. Brooke lives in Austin, Texas, with her husband and 3 daughters. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for coming out tonight. I know it's a busy time of year for you all with school coming tomorrow, and it's just so great that you're here tonight, and I'm looking forward to our time together.
Awesome. So Brooke, tell us, how did the Wait Until 8th pledge start?
So the pledge started about 7 years ago because I got that question that every parent gets eventually. If you haven't received it yet, don't worry, it is coming. And that is, Mom, when can I have a smartphone? And at the time, I was a little blindsided. My kids were young. They were preschool and 2nd grade and 3rd grade. And the older 2 that were in 2nd grade and 3rd grade, they already had friends with the latest iPhone. And of course, they wanted one too. And they asked, when can I have one, Mom? And I didn't really know much about it, but I just kept saying not yet. It just seemed in my gut too young of an age to hand over such a powerful device. So I kept saying not yet, but they would bring it up every so often. You know, can I have one for my birthday? What about Christmas? And they would always tell me when one of their friends would get one. You know, Parker got one for her birthday, or Sam's about to get one for the start of 4th grade. And the conversation kept going on like this, and I just kept saying, not yet, guys, not yet. And then one day I was driving by our local middle school, and kids were getting out from the school day, and what I noticed as everybody was coming out of the school building is that there were so many heads down. So many kids were completely captivated by what was going on their smartphone and oblivious to the peers around them. Nobody was talking or joking around. And it just made me sad as a mom to think that this was the road ahead for my daughters. They would either have a phone in their hands at a young age, or they'd be one of the few kids with their heads up. And for me, as a mom, I didn't want either situation. I didn't want them to have their heads down when they were in 6th grade looking at a phone and missing out on life and being like a kid. And I also didn't want them to be one of the only kids with their heads up, isolated, because everybody else had their heads down. And so that evening, I emailed out to about 20 or so friends and just asked them, you know, what are y'all doing about smartphones? Are you saying yes already? When do you plan to say yes? Does anybody else out there want to wait? And what I heard from friends was that at some point between 3rd and 5th grade, it starts to feel like all the kids have these devices. And if you look at the national data on this, most kids are getting a smartphone around 4th or 5th grade. Yet so many parents, they don't really want to say yes, but they don't know how to say no when it starts to feel like all these kids have them. And so we end up caving on this sooner than we would like. And out of this discussion came this idea of like, well, what if we said not yet together? What if we came together as a community and just say, we're not going to do this until a certain point. Would that make a difference? And there was enough interest to start the pledge. I built a website to make it easy for parents to sign online. We have 6 public elementary schools in our district, so I wanted to make it easy for people to sign across the district. And then within a matter of maybe 2 or 3 months, we had not only spread across our district, but across Austin, across Texas, and across the country. And we now have close to 70,000 families on board. And I think that it just resonates with so many families because we all get asked this eventually. So many of us want to wait. We just didn't know how to do it without any resource to help us to find our people on this. And so that is how it started, and I'm really excited to see how much it grows this year in Maine and in Texas and throughout the country.
Me too. So your girls are growing up.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about where you're at in that part of your journey with them?
Yeah, so we're at a very different season now than when I first started the pledge. I have 3 daughters. My older 2 are in high school. One's a junior. She started driving last year, which is crazy. And then I have a sophomore, and then I have a 6th grader. And they're all at different stages when it comes to technology. We take a slow tech approach in our family. We're not by any means a no tech family. We have iPads for school. My older 2 daughters now have phones. We have tablets for traveling, yet we want to say no when it makes sense, and when we do say yes, to say yes with smart limits in place. So when my girls were in elementary school, we really wanted to protect those elementary school years. We wanted that to be a time for them to connect with people in person, for them to play, for them to explore, for them to even be bored, because that's good for them too. And we didn't want any type of device to get in the way with that. And so for our kids, we didn't do any type of online connection in elementary school. We didn't have texting on a tablet or texting on a phone or texting on a watch. And I think that's really important for our kiddos to have that space to grow and to learn. Now, my youngest, she just started 6th grade in middle school. And when my older 2 started middle school, we started to allow them to text on a tablet that remained in our kitchen or in our family room for them to have that connection, but it was limited to time and space. So it didn't go with them to school or to their friend's house. It stayed at our house. There was, I think, a 30 or 45 minute time cap on it, and we took everything else off of that tablet. There wasn't any internet browser or games or social media. They could FaceTime their friends and their family, and they could participate in texting. And that was a nice, slow on-ramp for them to be able to connect with their peers, not to feel isolated, but not to always be distracted by the group text and the a bajillion emojis coming through the group text and all of that. And so that's where my youngest is right now. She just started to learn to text. We have a texting guide on our website that teaches kids how to text appropriately and moderately as far as like how much time they're doing on that. And that's where she will be for the next few years. Now, my older 2 received a smartphone before high school started, and they did get iPhones, but we took most of the stuff off of it. We wanted to start with something pretty basic. We took off the internet browser. We disabled their access to the App Store so they couldn't just download whatever they wanted. When we said yes to the phone, we didn't say yes to social media at the same time. That would have been way too much for them to handle. They were basically allowed to call, to text, to take pictures. They had a few apps on there that they needed for school, and that was it. And that's all they had on their phone for that first year or so. Recently, we added the internet browser. Again, there's restrictions in place as far as what they can access. They still cannot access the App Store. If they want to get an app, they have to request permission through parental controls, and we have to review it before we put it on the phone. And then my oldest, she's a junior this year, and when she turned 16, we said yes to one social media app. We wanted her to learn how to use this type of technology while she was still under our roof. We wanted to teach her what that looks like, what it looks like to be in that space in an appropriate way and use it moderately. And so we did say yes to one social media app. She's allowed to use it 30 minutes a day. We know from research that the more time kids spend on social media, the more likely there are going to be problems, and we can dive into that in a little bit. But as you can see, they're all at different spaces and times, and it comes to technology, and it's for a reason. We want to take a nice, slow approach. We're not saying no to tech. We're saying let's take the slow approach to technology and say yes when you're developmentally ready for the responsibility.
So what was your main concern about why you chose to delay the smartphones and social media?
So my main concern at the time, and it still is a major concern of mine, is just the amount of time kids are spending on these devices. It's anywhere between 5 hours a day to 9 hours a day when you look at the research out there, which is pretty astonishing. You know, kids are sleeping with their devices, kids are using their devices during school, and they're, holding up in the room after school, and they're just spending so much time on the smartphone. And when you spend that much time doing something else is not getting done. How much of life is being sacrificed to that time on a smartphone? How many books are never being read? How many creative projects are not being started? How many hobbies are never developed? How many hangouts with your friends in person are not happening because this device is getting in the way? And so I wanted for my kids to have more time being a kid, running around outdoors, playing board games, doing puzzles, reading, and less time Snapchatting, Instagramming, YouTubing, scrolling, and just, being a zombie on a screen. I really wanted them to have, a true childhood, a childhood that we all grew up with.
So why do you think it is that so many kids and adults are spending so much time on social media and their smartphones?
So yes, we're all spending so much time on these devices. If you go anywhere in America and really the world, you will notice this. You'll notice, families at a restaurant all looking at their device, families in a waiting room at the doctor's office, everybody's looking at the device. Nobody's talking, there's no community anymore because everybody is on their device. And the reason it's so hard for adults and kids alike is because much of what is on the device was intentionally designed to keep us there. The clever minds of Silicon Valley have intentionally designed the platforms to make it hard to leave. There are design features like notifications that constantly draw you into the app. And then once you're into the app, you're at the mercy of a very powerful algorithm that knows your likes and your dislikes and what you'll watch more of. And it keeps feeding you curated content to keep you there. There's also features like the autoplay once you finish one show, queuing up the next one. There's Snap Map and Snap Streak on Snapchat to keep kids there longer and longer. And so all these features are very similar to what people in Las Vegas use to keep people in casinos. They're all strategies to keep us there for a long time, and it's hard for adults to manage, and it's even harder for kids. Kids don't have developed minds. They're still learning how to, manage their time. They have no impulse control, and so for adults in their lives to expect them to be able to use a smartphone moderately and only for a few minutes of the day, it's too tall of an order.
They need our help.
They need our help, yes.
So let's talk about some other concerns. What are you seeing as an impact on student academics?
So what the research is showing in regards to phones and academics is that phones definitely have an impact on how kids are learning and how kids are focusing. One study out of the University of Texas showed that the mere presence of a phone, even if it's turned off and in the child's backpack, if the child knows that the phone is near them while they're doing homework or while they're at school, the research shows that they cannot focus as well on the task at hand. And what the researchers said in the study is that it's basically like a brain drain, that you're constantly thinking in the back of your mind, what's going on in that group chat and what's going on my post and did somebody like it? And you can't focus on geometry and you can't focus on science when that is present. And we also know that schools that put good smartphone policies in place, and the gold standard is that they're not available from bell to bell, that those schools see increased testing scores and increased grades. They also see less bullying. They also see less drama in the hallways. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then lastly, what we also know is that research is showing that kids that have heavy exposure to smartphones or tablets earlier in childhood have a harder time with reading comprehension down the road. So it impacts their attention span and their focus. And so it's really hard for them to sit down and read a chapter of a book when they, for most of their childhood, had been consuming YouTube shorts or TikTok videos. They just don't have the attention span for it. And so it's challenging. It's challenging for the kids in the classroom. It's challenging for the teachers managing all of that. And so those are some of the ramifications of smartphone use for kids on academics.
You mentioned bullying. Cyberbullying is a significant concern for all of us, educators and parents alike. Is there evidence that delaying a smartphone impacts the chance of cyberbullying happening?
So there actually is. What research is showing on the cyberbullying front is that if you introduce a smartphone earlier in childhood, so if you introduce a phone in elementary school versus middle school or high school, then that child is more likely to be involved with cyberbullying. And when you think about it, that just makes sense. Kids that are in elementary school, they're still growing, they're still learning how to be kind and share and eye contact and empathy, and they just don't have that mastered in person. So why would we expect them to be kind and respectful on these online platforms that were really designed for adults?
What do we know about the connection between smartphones and mental health?
So in this area, there is just a mounting body of evidence. Since the introduction of phones and social media, what we've seen is rates for anxiety, depression, suicide, self-harm, visits to the hospital due to self-harm. These have all increased so much, especially for girls between the ages of 10 and 14. These are the most vulnerable years, and this is the most vulnerable group. So there's a lot of research that is showing all of this, and we also know that suicide is the second leading cause of death for children, unfortunately now. And then other research shows that if you introduce a smartphone earlier in childhood, again, if you introduce it in elementary school versus later in childhood, that child is more likely to encounter mental health issues like anxiety or depression that will last all the way into early adulthood.
What else do you worry about?
So another worry that's heavy on my heart is just the content that kids can be exposed to on these devices, whether that be pornography or sexting or toxic beauty content. All of this type of content is flooding our kids' pathways online. And it's concerning. The average age a child is exposed to pornography for the first time is around 9 or 10, depending on the study. And interestingly enough, most kids get phones around age 10. And most kids see pornography for the first time on a phone. And so that's a real concern. Sexting is also a concern that happens earlier than you would think, and it happens more often than you would think. And then toxic beauty content is another concern, especially for young girls. A lot of times girls will go on to TikTok or Instagram and they'll search for something that's very innocent and benign, such as maybe healthy salad recipes or how to look great at spring break. And they may be watching a video about salad recipes or cute outfits for spring break or skincare, but the algorithm can quickly take them down a rabbit hole where before they know it, they're watching videos about how to survive on 300 calories a day and how to be your skinniest and, how to, not eat for most of the part of your day. And so these are real concerns. This content is very dangerous, it's very toxic, and it's having an impact on kids. If you look at any of the studies out there, it's all pointing to this, and it's increasing the number of eating disorders that are happening with very young children because of this exposure to this harmful content.
So in our world, we have families who feel the need to get in touch with their children before 8th grade. What would you recommend?
So thankfully, there are a lot of good tech-wise options that have come out in the past, 3 to 5 years that were designed with kids in mind, and they're communication devices. They're not toys, they're not social media platforms, they're basically just devices that call and text. So if you need to get in touch with your kid before the end of 8th grade, we encourage a basic phone. We have a list on our website, there's some great options out there. I will say, though, that most kids thrive in elementary school and most of middle school without any type of device. It's so good for them. It's good for them to be unplugged, unconnected, and not have a constant tether to mom and dad all the time. When you leash up a child early in childhood with a smartwatch at 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, or a basic phone or any type of phone, they have a hard time having any sort of independent thinking. Decision making is stunted. They always feel like they have to check with you before they do something. And so I think that's a real risk when we introduce a personal device to a child too early. Now, there's definitely situations where it just makes sense to have some type of communication device. Maybe the child is going between mom and dad's house, or maybe your family has a ton of logistics, or mom and dad both work until 6 of the night. And in those situations, I highly encourage families to look at a basic phone, look at a basic watch. You don't need to go from 0 to 60 and give your kid a $1,000 iPhone because you need to get in touch with them.
So we may have some parents in the audience who have already sort of crossed this bridge and have already purchased a smartphone. Maybe you've already allowed your child to get into social media platforms, and now you're thinking, how am I going to rein this in? Do you have some recommendations?
Yeah, so I've talked to so many parents at similar talks to these and at other events, and I always have a parent that comes up to me and I made a mistake and I did this too early, and like, what do you suggest? How do I walk it back? How do I put the genie back in the bottle? And I would just encourage you as parents to remember that you are the parent. At any point, you can change how you're operating within your home. And there's ways, if you've already said yes to the smartphone, to rein in how your kid is using the smartphone. So you can take off the internet browser with parental controls. And if your child is in elementary school or middle school, they don't need the internet at their fingertips all the time, and you can absolutely take that off. You can also disable the child's access to the App Store, which I highly recommend as well if your child's in elementary or middle school. That App Store has millions and millions of apps. Most of them are great. They do great things. I love a lot of apps on my phones, but there are a lot of apps out there that are very problematic. And as the parent, you have to be the gatekeeper. You can't just let the child decide what's on their phone. So take off that App Store for sure. If you've said yes to social media already in elementary and middle school, highly encourage you to hit the pause button on there. All the experts are saying that it's too young, and there's so much research that shows that they are not ready for it. So hit the pause button on social media. And then lastly, this is something that every single parent should do, and if you're not doing this already, start tonight. Phones do not belong in the bedroom, period. Every expert agrees on this. When phones are in the bedroom at night with your kid, they're not sleeping. They are more at risk for risky behavior, such as sexting and looking at pornography and engaging in toxic text threads where bullying is happening. And so it's really important that you just take that off the table. Have your kid check in a phone with you about an hour before it's bedtime. Our devices should definitely go to bed before we do, and they need to go to bed outside of our bedroom.
Mm. So what about monitoring? Should parents be monitoring what kids are doing online? And when I say kids, I'm talking about all range of kids,
yes.
Pre-K all the way to grade 12. Is that not an invasion of their privacy?
So what I share with my children and with other parents is that nothing that we do online is private, period. I'm not afforded that luxury, nobody in this room is, and our kids are not. So they should not expect any privacy when they are online. And therefore, as parents, we have to be their coaches and their instructors, and we have to teach them what to do when they're online, and when they've gone off track, we need to coach them back onto the right path. Now, we can't do any of that if we're completely oblivious to what is going on that device. So we need to monitor what they're doing. And it's going to look different based on your child's age, on their maturity, how long they've had the device. I like to compare it to when our kids are little and they want to go outside when they're 1, 2, 3 years old. They want to go out in the front yard and play. You're not going to let that child go outside by themselves at that age without you monitoring them. You're going to be out there making sure they're not running in the street. You're going to be out there making sure they share, that they don't talk to strangers. And then as they get older and as they demonstrate responsibility, then maybe you're running inside to throw the laundry in or switch out dinner, and you're checking on them still. And then eventually, I promise, they're going to get to an age where they can run around outside for hours without your supervision because you have prepared them for that situation. Same thing online. At first, when they start texting or they get a smartphone or they're on social media, you need to be checking it pretty frequently to make sure they know what they're doing, that they're not doing anything inappropriate, that they're using it moderately. This is so important. And during childhood, I don't think monitoring should go away. I have a 17-year-old, and I still check in with what she's doing on her phone and what she's doing on social media. And it's important that she knows that. It's not anything done in secret. She knows I check on her. And that gives her an out on some situations. If she ever feels uncomfortable, if somebody ever asks her for a nude photo, she can easily say, hey, my mom checks my phone. Or if she's in a sticky group thread situation and people are ganging up on one girl, she can easily say, hey guys, this isn't cool, my mom checks my phone. If I didn't monitor or check in with her occasionally on what was going on with the device, she wouldn't have that out. And she could be in very compromising situations if she didn't have that out. So it really does help our kids to know that, yes, we monitor what they're doing. Nothing is private. We are here to coach them, not to catch them. We are on their digital team.
Absolutely. And so I think many parents may feel really overwhelmed in trying to figure out how to set up their child's smartphone or a tablet even with parental controls. Do you have any recommendations?
So yes, parental controls are very overwhelming, especially with Apple sometimes. They're constantly changing things. And so it's important to really lean on organizations that have already done the homework for you. And I'm going to share with Rhonda after this a list of resources that you all can check out. One organization on that list is called Protect Young Eyes. And this organization has step-by-step parental control guides on their website for any device you can imagine, an iPhone, an iPad, an Android, an Xbox, you name it, it's there, it's easy to follow. So definitely check that out and put those parental controls in place. You can set up the phone where it turns off at a certain point. You can set up the phone where they can't be on it more than 2 hours a day. You can set up the phone to limit how much social media usage. The parental controls are there. They're not perfect. They're not 100%, but they do help.
What are your thoughts on social media, if we can circle back around to that for a minute? Is there an appropriate age for particular platforms? What's your advice?
So we encourage families to hold off on social media until 16. And I know it's hard. Like, I'm in the middle of it with my sophomore in high school. She is dying to get Snapchat, but she is not 16 yet. And it's hard because most kids are on social media. 95% of kids between the ages of 13 and 19 are on social media. 40% of tweens between the ages of 8 and 12 are on social media. But all the experts, including the Surgeon General of the United States, are cautioning parents about young kids being on these platforms. The Surgeon General came out last year with a 25-page health advisory warning parents about the dangers of social media for kids. And even recently, he's been advocating for a warning label to be on all social media platforms comparable to what is on cigarette packs. So just sit with that. He wants to put a label that's similar to what's on a cigarette pack on all social media platforms because he is so concerned about all the research showing that it's not good for kids. We know from research that nearly half of adolescents who spend time on social media don't feel great about themselves afterwards. We also know that if kids spend more than 3 hours a day on social media, which most kids are, the average time that kids spend on social media is about 3.5 hours, then they're going to be twice as likely to experience anxiety and depression. And then if that number goes up to 5 hours a day, then the risk triples. And I know these hours seem crazy, like how can anybody spend 5 hours a day on social media, but our kids are. Like, we have some high school girls that are spending more time on social media than they do sleeping every day. It's basically become a full-time job for them as far as the hours they're spending on it.
There are some very tricky parenting challenges in this discussion, right?
Yes.
How do you encourage parents to equip their children to be able to respond appropriately when they encounter things like pornography?
Yes, so we as parents have to have a twofold strategy. Yes, we have to have parental controls in place. They are important, they help mitigate our risk, but we need to keep in mind that parental controls are not 100%, and when there's a will, there's a way. And then we also have to consider that our kids are around kids that don't have any parental controls on their device. So at any point, our kids can be exposed to harmful, inappropriate content on a device. So they need to be prepared for what that looks like and what to do in those situations. And that is going to require, as parents, talking to about our kids about stuff we don't really want to talk about because it's awkward and sticky and uncomfortable, and we have to talk to our kids about these subjects. So if you haven't talked to your kids yet about what sex is, that's important. If you haven't talked to your kids yet about what pornography is, that is important. If you haven't talked to them about what to do when they encounter pornography, that is important to discuss. And the list goes on and on. They need to know about some of the mental health challenges that their friends are facing. They need to know about cyberbullying. They need to know about the risks of toxic beauty content. There's also sextortion as another case where basically this is happening a lot for teen boys where they are basically getting blackmailed into giving money for pictures that somebody has convinced them to give them that are their new pictures. So that's another concern. If you have conversations to prepare your kids for what is out there, that equips them to know what to do, and they're not blindsided, and they're not taking their questions and their concerns to their friends or to Siri or to Google or to social media. They're coming to you, and that is the most important aspect of all of this, is to have that strong relationship with mom and dad about all of this.
So I think many parents feel quite overwhelmed with this idea of keeping screen time in check. Yes. Do you have some recommendations about screen time?
So I like to encourage parents to think through how they can cultivate a love and desire for life offline. If as a family you are enjoying time together, whether it be hiking or biking or going to concerts together or preparing great meals together, whatever the passion is or hobby is around your family, if you're spending time as a family doing that on a consistent basis, that's going to crowd out screen time. If we just keep saying no to screen time, but we're not filling anything else into their schedule, that may just become the default mode. So we need to structure our home and structure our calendar where our kids are getting those life-enriching activities with us and with their peers. Kids actually are not even hanging out with friends as much as they used to. One study that I read recently said that kids are spending about 3.5 hours less each week with their friends. So it's even, creating space for kids to get together. I think all that helps with crowding out screen time, and then pairing that with some really good boundaries, keeping phones out of the bedroom, making meals device free. When you're in the car just around town and not on a road trip, not allowing phones out. I always say to my kid, car time is conversation time. It's not a time for you to catch up on your device. It's a time to catch up with me, or it's a time for you just to daydream and be bored, but that phone does not come out in my car. These all make a difference. If you do all these small little steps, it adds up to make a big difference for our kids.
I love all of that. We have some area businesses that have donated lots of things that we're going to give away tonight that will support families spending that kind of time together.
That's
device free.
Oh, good.
Right? So we're excited
Good.
about that. So do you have some resources for us that you can share with us? Because you're here in Maine today, but you're going to get on a plane tomorrow and you're going to fly back home. What are some resources that we can provide to our families?
Well, definitely check out the website waituntil8th.org. We have a whole digital training section on that website. We have family conversation guides. We have best practices and tips and resources. I'm also going to provide your district a resource list via email that has a few of the recommendations I made today, so you can check that out as well. But there's some great organizations on there: Defend Young Minds, Protect Young Eyes, Common Sense Media. These are all great resources. If you haven't read The Anxious Generation yet, I know a lot of people in the district have already read it, but it's a great book that came out in March. It's on the bestseller list, and it really unpacks how we've gone from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood, and how that's having a detrimental impact on this generation. Lastly, I really encourage you to watch the Social Dilemma documentary as well. I believe that's on Netflix still. Whenever my kids start middle school, I always watch that with them, and I think it's just fascinating to watch, and I think at that age they get it, and it makes an impact. And I even talked to one of y'all's teachers today, and she said that she watched, I think she was, 22 or 23, and she said that she wished that she had watched it when she was younger, that it would have made such a difference in how she spent her time online if she had seen that documentary before as like a young adult, if she had seen it as a teenager. So definitely check that out as well.
I am so glad you're here.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you came. Before we close tonight, though, we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions, if you have them, of Brooke. She's here, she's with us, she's all ours. So is there anyone that wants to pose a question of Brooke? Sure.
My kids are going into 8th and 5th grade, so they were in kindergarten and 3rd grade when COVID shut the world down.
Yes.
So for 2 years after that, all of their socialization was virtual and digital. So those important years of their brain developing were kind of different, than ours were. How can we help them rewire, what they learned during that critical time? We do, we implement the screen time and everything stays outside of the bedroom, but is there anything else we can do further to help those kids that were impacted by the pandemic to rewire their brains to a more traditional childhood?
So I just want to repeat the question if I can capture it, okay? Because this is being recorded, and I'm not sure that would have been caught. I'm not sure over there. But so the question is, how can we sort of catch up? Because during COVID, the kind of socialization our children had was quite different, right? And now your children are older, and you want to implement some things that can help with that rewiring again.
So first of all, I would just say, give yourself grace. I mean, that time in history was absolute madness, and I think we were just all trying to survive, and all bets were out the window, and we made it through. But yes, it's time to reset now. And I think it's even explaining kids, like, that was a very special situation, and some habits formed during that time that we want to, kind of backtrack, and we want to reset. And I'm concerned because of A, B, and C. And maybe it's even watching, now that you have a 5th and an 8th grade, watching The Social Dilemma with them if you haven't already. I think that does a great job. If they're already, on social media, it may be just taking a pause from it, or a reset, or a 30-day detox, or 15-day detox. Anything helps. And I think that, along with some of the other boundaries we talked about tonight, as far as keeping those phones out of the bedroom, I think it's hard, because sometimes parents go, well, I never put this in place. Like, how can I, rewind the clock, and how can I tell Susie now that she has to, turn in her phone at night when she hasn't been the past 4 years? But I think that's okay. I think we have to remember that we are the parents, and that we are in charge of parenting, and we can change our minds, and we can point to the research, and we can say, because of all this, we're going to do things differently. Just if we were to find out some product we've been buying isn't good for our health anymore, we would say, hey, we're not going to buy that anymore. So I think all of that would make a big difference. Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
I'll just ask a curious question. You said you waited until 16 for your daughter to have social media. I was just curious which social media you then allowed her to have, and why that one over any of the others.
Oh, that's a fabulous question. So you allowed your daughter to move on to social media at 16.
Yes.
Which platform and why?
So it's a great question, because in an ideal world, none of us would be on social media, and every platform has issues, and there's no perfect social media platform, just all that to be said. But we did want her to learn how to use it, and we ended up choosing Snapchat because the way her peers primarily are using that app is to communicate from either peer-to-peer or peer to a small group of peers. So it's a lot of sending back and forth messages and pictures and videos versus than just having like pure content consumption, which I think is more prevalent on TikTok and Instagram. When you go on TikTok or on Instagram, you're just consuming, on TikTok, you're just consuming videos. You're not really communicating with people directly. And on Instagram, I feel like it's a lot of, consuming, like, oh, there's a photo of my best friend in California, and look at that person's out, but you're just consuming all these pictures and videos of your friends, but you're not actually like talking to them. Whereas Snapchat, they're actually communicating from one person to another person that they know in real life, and it's serving as a communication platform. So that was why we said yes to Snapchat. All that to say is Snapchat has so many issues, and I would never let any child on it before 16. The Snap Map is highly problematic. You can see exactly where everybody is that you're connected to on Snap Map unless you have it turned off. So that creates a lot of FOMO for kids if they look at their Snap Map and they see, hey, like everybody's here and I'm not. That can have an impact on their mental health. So that's an issue with Snapchat. Another issue with Snapchat are the Snap streaks. So going into making sure you're maintaining a streak with somebody. I think it's important to talk to your kid about how it doesn't really matter how many days you've connected with somebody. There's no prize at the end of it. It's just a mechanism to keep you coming back for more. So just unpacking that with them. And so we talked a lot about that. And then as I mentioned before, she only gets it for 30 minutes a day, and that's for a reason. So she has that connection, but it's just for 30 minutes a day.
So like video games have a chat feature and exposure to all sorts of things like Roblox and also Fortnite and a lot of boys kind of go that direction, and they have this whole social life going on with that. Do you use the same regulation for those, or what's been your experience with that?
So for our personal family, I have 3 daughters, so we haven't had to really, dive into this much. They'll sometimes go to a friend's house and occasionally play a video game, but we don't have any type of gaming device at our house. But as far as families that I talk to, I would say if that is part of the routine of your child's life, definitely limiting how much time they're on it, and if they're playing with somebody that they know the person they're playing with in real life, because there are so many situations where somebody is posing as a 14-year-old boy, but he's really a 50-year-old man in Brazil trying to swindle him out of some money. So I think that's just important to keep in mind as well, is making sure they're connected to people that they know in real life, that they're gaming in a shared space. They're not holed up in their room for hours. I think that's very important as well. And again, that there's a time limit. I think it's fine if they play, 30 minutes of a game, but I don't think it's great if they play 5 hours of a game. That all has an impact on them.
Is there a question in the back? Yes.
I wanted to know the name of the Netflix documentary.
Oh, the Netflix documentary.
So that documentary is The Social Dilemma, and it came out several years ago. It's the person behind it, his name is Tristan Harris. He used to work for Google, and he came out a few years ago, and he was on 60 Minutes. You can still see his interview. It's fascinating. But he basically comes out and says that, all of what we're doing here in Silicon Valley, it's not right. All this persuasive design we're using to capture people's time and attention, it's having a real impact on culture and society and kids. And so he started an organization called Center for Humane Technology, and then that group helped with the documentary Social Dilemma. But it's really interesting and fascinating to watch.
School districts help kind of bolster this idea, given that so much of education is now based on technology? We're sending our kids home with computers, where they may have access to these sites and social media and whatnot. So what would your recommendations for school districts be?
Yeah, so this is all very challenging because 10, 15 years ago it was seen as very progressive to give every child a device, whether it be a Chromebook or an iPad. And so now we're invested and all of our kids have these devices. And I think it's important that it's coming from the home and from the school district that technology is a tool to be used in certain ways. It's not a boredom eliminator. It's not just something that you do when you have some free time. We have to stay on task and use it in a very intentional way. And so school districts that are doing a good job of this have a lot of emphasis and teacher training on how to use these devices in the classroom. It shouldn't be used all the time for everything. And this is difficult because during the pandemic, a lot of assignments had to be with these devices. And so we have gotten into a habit and a routine of making everything be on these devices. So anything a school district can do to tap down on that and start thinking creatively, how can we go back to pencil and paper for some things? How can we do creative projects? When can we not use this device? When does that make sense? And also, when does it make sense to use it? Because there's some great applications when it comes to technology as well. So it's finding that balance and then also teaching our kids through some type of digital citizenship class or a curriculum that's being taught at different stages throughout their childhood in the school district. I think that makes a big difference. And then I shared earlier too that I think it's important too for teachers to remember that not all kids have phones and not all kids have social media, so don't add that extra pressure by expecting that they do and putting any type of assignment on it or ask kids to pull out their phones for any reason during the class, because then that just adds more pressure to the situation and makes the kid without it feel more isolated.
Brooke, I had shared with you earlier about some concerns that parents may have around school emergencies. We're living in a time when some pretty significantly horrific things have happened in schools. And I sense that parents may be quite anxious about not being able to reach their child immediately if we're going to a phone-free day. Can you talk a little bit about that? Have you heard from that perspective?
So this is a common concern for parents. It's a concern of mine too. Like, we want our kids to be safe, and it's scary because unfortunately school shootings are happening across our country. And so there is this, kind of initial panic. Well, I have to be able to get in touch with my child if there's an emergency. Like, they have to be able to reach me. But in those situations, we need to really lean into what the experts and the research is showing in those situations. And security experts that have been boots on the ground in school shootings have said that they do not provide safety. They actually can create an atmosphere where your child is more at risk during those situations, because the child is not focused on staying safe and staying out of sight. They're more focused on trying to reach you. They're panicked. They're trying to text you or call you, or they may be trying to capture the situation on video. And what the experts are saying is that this is a big distraction, that they don't need a device in those situations. And anytime they do any type of safety drills in school, all devices are expected to be up because they want the kids to know how to react in those situations, and the devices make the situation worse.
Mm-hmm. Are there other questions from the audience? Oh, we have another one in the back.
How much time in a school or educational setting for elementary, middle school, and whatnot would be acceptable, like say in a public school?
So how much time during the school day would be acceptable? Like screen time? Yeah.
I think that's a hard question because not all screen time is created equal. So if the child is just on some type of gamification app, and there are many education apps that are like this that basically have turned learning into a game, and they're getting all types of little rewards, and they're getting all these little dopamine hits to their brain because of the rewards. Spending hours on an app like that is not great for the child. But if the child is using something on that device, maybe they're watching a very instructional video, or perhaps they're doing a collaborative project and they're working on a presentation and they're being creative, that's different than that. So it's really hard to put an exact number, like you should not exceed 3 hours a day. I would always say that less is more, and when we can find areas to balance time on the technology with time off of it, I think that's a win for the kid and for the community.
So Brooke, if there are families here tonight that are interested in taking the Wait Until 8th pledge, what are their next steps?
So the pledge is real easy to start. You just go to our website, waittillth.org, and you can sign there, and it's organized by grade and by school. So you would enter your child's grade and their school, and then once your child's grade hits 10 or more families, then the pledge becomes activated and we link your group up. And you would get an email from us saying, congratulations, the 4th grade class at this elementary school is activated and you're waiting now, and these are the families that are waiting. And that's super helpful because then you can tell your kid, hey, you're not the only one. John's waiting and Jim's waiting and Sam's waiting. And that goes a long way. And usually what happens is after you hit that 10 mark threshold, more people usually join because they think, oh, well, now more people are doing this. Like this is a great group to be with. I'm going to join this pledge too. And then as more people join the pledge, you'll get updates from us. But the pledge is only activated at that 10 mark. And the reason we did that is because there's a lot of parents out there that are all for waiting, but they don't want to be the only one waiting. And so they want to make sure there's like a big enough group momentum going before they sign. So that's why we've set it up that way, that you're signing and you're agreeing to do this as long as 9 other families are doing it with you.
Awesome. I want to say again, I'm so glad you're here. As we conclude tonight, we actually have amazing door prizes that our community partners have sponsored for all of you tonight. Now,